Hey guys, Kevin Bupp here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow podcast. Our mission is to help you build and maintain massive amounts of cash flow through income-producing real estate investments. Now, our guest for this week's show is a real estate expert and international developer, Michael Cobb. Now, after success in the computer industry, Michael formed ECI Development in 1996. This residential resort development company builds communities in Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, and Mexico. Tropical neighborhoods include homes, condominiums, golf courses, and hotels in beach, agricultural, and mountain locations. Michael serves on the board of several multinational companies, charitable foundation, holds a CIPS certification, is a past international director of NAR, and heads the International Referral Network for Realtors. Michael and his wife, Carol, live as expats, raising two daughters overseas from 2002 through 2016. And so, guys, without further ado, I'd like to welcome my guest for today's show, Michael Cobb. Michael, how you doing today?
Good, Kevin. Thanks for having me on. It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. And I know that I just mentioned there that ultimately you and your family lived as expats from 2002 through 2016. As we started the show here, you mentioned that you are back in the States. And so my guess is that you've been back in the States since, is it 2016 or 17 when you actually came back?
About 4.5 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
What prompted you coming back to the U.S. after all those years overseas?
Yeah, great question. We loved it. We went to we lived in Nicaragua for most of those years. My wife and I lived in Belize for about 6 months as well. But that big stint was in Nicaragua, and I know a lot of people like Nicaragua, but it was wonderful. It was an incredible place to live and raise children. We moved there when my daughter Amanda was 2. We got there. We had another little daughter, Emily, who came along a couple years later, and we thought we would be there for 2-3 years to get our Grand Pacifica community started, get our golf course built, the first homes, everything, streets, water system, sewer, fiber optic network. I mean, the whole kit and caboodle, we put it all in. And when we had that done and we'd hired, the architects, the engineers, the marketing, the accounting staff, and finally a chief operating officer, my wife and I went out to dinner one night and we said, and we kept our home because, we live about 90 miles west of Washington, D.C. in the Shenandoah Valley. And it's a little college town. And so we rented our home. It was rented for, almost 3.5 years. And we went out to dinner one night and we said, do we want to stay in Nicaragua? Do we want to go back? And we decided that we wanted to stay there. And we stayed 11 more years, which was a total of 16 years. And the reason we came back was our oldest daughter, Amanda, and her sister, Emily, were engaged in classical ballet training and had done phenomenal there in Nicaragua. They actually trained with Nicaragua's prima ballerina. They were dancing at competitions all over Central America. And at one of them in Panama, one of the judges was from the Joffrey Ballet Program in New York City, who offered our 15-year-old daughter a scholarship to their high school ballet program in New York. And Kevin, I can see a picture of like a family behind you. So I think you're married and you got some kids, right?
Yep. Yes, sir.
So how I like to describe it is this way. Mama Bear was not living in Nicaragua with Baby Bear in New York City.
That makes sense.
Not a chance. So we came back and we've been back since. And I think Carol and I, my wife Carol and I, we will probably expat again in the future. It's a wonderful quality of life. We loved it, and I think we will return to it at some point. Yeah.
Being that your children, I think you said your one daughter was 2 years old when you first moved, and then you had your second while you were there, correct? And so what type of cultural shock was it bringing them back to the States full time?
Well, it's a good question. And, there's a great book called Third Culture Kids. And it's a book about kids who are, in our case, Americans raised in Nicaragua, but it could be any kid raised outside their parents' home culture, right? And it was written by some missionaries who wrote it for the missionary community, who largely do this. And it's for expats as well, State Department, military brats, that kind of stuff. But it's very interesting because our daughters aren't really typical American, but they're definitely not Nicaraguan either. And so the adjustment into any society is challenging, right? It's a little bit challenging because they don't quite fit. And what's fascinating about this book, and talks about this, our daughters will be more likely to marry a German kid who grew up in Japan than the traditional American kid, right? Because it's another third culture kid.
Sure.
So yeah, there were adjustments, but by and large, we came home quite a bit. We came back to the States quite a bit, and we always compared things. And by the way, I mean, I give a whole presentation on this, a couple hour presentation on moving your family overseas. And one of the analogies I give is this idea of, if you're a fish in a fishbowl and it's the only fishbowl you're in, you don't really know that you're in a fishbowl. But if you have a fishbowl and you move a fish from one to the other, right now, you're in two different fishbowls. And so what happened is we would have these discussions at home, around the dinner table, wherever, about culture. Well, that's how they do it here in Nicaragua, but that's not how we do it in the States, or vice versa. This is how we do it in the States, but it's not how they do it in Nicaragua. And so this cultural awareness became part and parcel of who they are, which is a consciousness of something that most people just simply don't have. So it's
very interesting.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I absolutely love it. Well, my wife is multicultural, born in Poland, immigrated here when she was 12, lived in Spain for a period of time. So she's trilingual, and she married a good old boy from Pennsylvania. That's sololingual, I guess.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, where in Pennsylvania, Kevin?
Harrisburg.
I grew up in Slippery Rock at the western end of the state. So
absolutely. Well, I'm going to back up a little bit. I'm going to back up to, you and I were chatting a little bit about, the leap that you took at some point in your adult life when you were essentially leaving the computer world, right? You'd spent 12 plus years in the software industry, and ultimately made the leap of faith into real estate development. I mean, it's such a dramatic move, but I'm sure there's more to the story. So please unpack that a little bit and help us better understand exactly what that shift looked like.
Well, I think for many of the readers or listeners who are on this podcast, right, and it's a very similar story. I wanted to be an investor in real estate. And so I was in the computer business, and I went to Belize on a trip with a buddy of mine. It was just a fun trip for me. It was a little bit of work for him. He's an asset protection attorney, and was setting up asset protection trusts for physicians in Belize. It's a great place to do that. And so he was going down to work. I went down to play. I was 30 years old in the computer business, and I went out to this little island called Ambergris Key. And to me, it felt like Key West, 30, 40, 50 years ago. It was like a time machine, right? All the streets were sand streets. The tallest building was 2 stories. And I just got down there. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can see where this is going, and I want to be a part of it. And so, I don't know, a couple months later, he was going back again. I said, come on, man, let's go. And we bought a couple condominiums there in 1994. I was 30 years old. My very first rental property was a property in Belize, right? An offshore property. And it's funny because what happened is that he and I saw this incredible hole in the marketplace. So we bought these condos to get involved in rental, like tourist rental, nightly rental kind of stuff, long before Airbnb. I was running ads in the Washington Post magazine and the classifieds, rent my condo in Belize, $800 a week or whatever it was, right? And it worked, right? But what was interesting, Kevin, was we got down there, and what we saw, we made full payment for our condo, right? They were, I think, $120,000 each, 2 condos, and we offered him $100,000, and he took it, and it was like a 20% discount, right? And so we're down there, we're getting to know the developer over the first few months that we're down there, enjoying our condos, and we're talking to him. His name was Jim. And Jim, why aren't you finishing these buildings that are next to ours? We don't see anybody working on them. And what he told us was that the financing, there was no financing. Like the banks in Belize wouldn't lend you, Kevin, any money because you're a foreigner. And the bank in Clearwater or Shepherdstown, they're going to loan money on a condo in Belize. And so Joel and I put together a little mortgage company to serve the need of these consumers who wanted to buy a property, say in Belize, and it was in Belize. But the collateral was there. So we started a mortgage company to provide financing to North Americans, and that just rolled. And we ended up doing mortgages in Costa Rica and in Honduras and the Bay Islands of Honduras. And that business ultimately grew into a bank. We got our banking license in 2003 in Belize. but we're still largely a mortgage company. That's the business of our business is mortgages, but we are a licensed bank in Belize, and we provide financing to North Americans buying property throughout Central and South America now. But that's how we got on the development side. It was kind of the back door through the finance side.
What was the original source of that debt, if you don't mind me asking?
We went out to friends and family, and we said, I went out to a bunch of my buddies in the computer business, and he went out to a bunch of his clients, and we put together about $3 million, and we just started buying paper, mortgage paper, up and down, the coastline of Belize, and then again in Roatan as well. And then it just kind of grew and grew and grew. And the reason we actually turned it into a bank was we couldn't get enough money to supply the mortgage loans. I mean, we had more loan demand than we had money. And so the bank was the way to get deposits, to then take those deposits and lend them out as mortgage loans. Yeah.
Interesting that development was actively happening there, but yet no one had identified that. I mean, they identified that hole, but no one, did anything to fill that hole or that void on the finances. So what a typical developer would only build a unit once it was actually already purchased, and then they would actually build the entirety of that unit, or how did it work prior to you guys actually entering into the game and actually bringing debt to the equation?
Sure. Well, a couple things. A lot of times the developers didn't know what they didn't know. I mean, they would go down, they'd buy a couple acres on the beach and build the first, 20, 30, 40 condos, whatever. And this is what happened to Jim. Jim built the first 44 condos, 11 buildings of 4 each, beautiful pool in the middle. And when somebody would walk through the door, I mean, they'd either write him a check and he'd be really happy, or they'd want financing and he would have to finance the people himself, which was killing him. It was, I mean, you can't keep development going if you're financing your sales or a big percentage of your sales. So, but Kevin, here's the shocking news. Even today, whatever that is, 27 years later, or whatever the math on that is, right? There's still only one institution doing what we do, and it's us. I'm just shocked. Banks down there do not want to lend money to foreigners. And I don't know of a single US or Canadian bank that will lend money on a condo in Belize, for example.
Why is that, though? I mean, there's got to be more to that. You've dissected this. I mean, what are the real reasons here why there hasn't been anyone else that's entered into this game?
Well, I think the reason the Central American banks don't do it is the interest rates they can get locally are very high.
Sure.
I mean, credit card is sometimes as much as 4% a month. I mean, 48% a year credit card, right? Or 2-3% a month, or a mortgage loan might be 15-18%. And so a North American consumer isn't going to pay that kind of a rate for a mortgage. And so even if they offered it, it wouldn't be attractive in the marketplace to a North American. So I think that the reality is it's a liquidity crunch. There just isn't enough liquidity. There's plenty of liquidity, but they can use it up in the local market at much higher interest rates. So it's competitive, right? It's the money's going to go where it's treated best. And in this case, it's in the local domestic market. And there's certain expertise to it as well, understanding the North American client and how to work with them. There have been a few other institutions that have tried, but not very successfully. And I think right now in Belize, we are the only bank. And I'm pretty sure, I guess in Panama, you can, as a foreigner, get a loan. And so Panama might be the one example that's outside this. But there, I mean, you've got incredible liquidity. Panama's a banking center. So the liquidity there is much higher than it is in most of the other countries in the region.
What are typical debt terms for the end consumer that's buying a property, and just use Belize as the example there?
Sure. It depends. I mean, the bank's normal rates right now are 7.9%. Again, much higher than they are in the States, but considerably lower than anything in the region. And the term is up to 10 years. A lot of times you can balloon it out a little sooner, get a little better rate. I mean, they're variable, but say 8 to 10% on a 10-year AM.
Got it. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Now, I know that your trip down to, is it Ambergris? Is that how you pronounce it?
Ambergris Key. Very good.
Ambergris Key. 27 odd years ago, you saw a lot of opportunity there. You saw, again, you're looking back 30 years, what Key West, or 40 years, what Key West probably looked like before it got just mass development coming in.
Right.
But aside from that, why Central America? Aside from opportunities in the U.S., why Central America? The various other countries that you've conducted business within.
Sure. Well, I also view a lot of Central America and Latin America, but more broadly, the developing world. But in our case, a couple of reasons why Central America. The time zones are almost all 1, 2, 3 hours, right, from anywhere in the U.S. And so when you travel north south, your travel's a lot easier. The time zones are a lot easier. If you're working in this part of the world, then you can call somebody back in the US and deal in the same time zone. That's a big deal. Connectivity via air is great into the region. Again, another thing that makes it simple. And, for example, a flight from Miami to Belize is 1 hour and 40 minutes. Houston is 2 hours, right? Dallas, 2 hours. So Atlanta, 2.5. So again, getting to Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama is, 2, 3, 4 hour flight, as opposed to anywhere in Europe, you're at, 5, 6 plus, right? And so Asia, call it a whole day. And I mean, how you slice it, it's a day to get to Asia, right? So this part of the world works. But when you break it down and you look at the various countries, I've made a scale. In fact, one of the documents, if folks are interested in getting it, is our consumer resource guide. And in that consumer resource guide, it's a great document. It's a great resource for folks looking to own property overseas. But one of the things we have is a 3-4 page article that outlines this curve that I've put together, and it's really the development curve or the popularity curve, and they hang together, right? A place that's super really popular, Cancun, has very high priced real estate, but it also has lots of popularity, lots of traction, lots of rentals, right? I mean, and a country like Nicaragua is very unpopular. And it has much lower price points of property, but much lower occupancies, right? That's to be expected. And how I put the countries on this list is I just said to myself, where would someone from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania be likely to go on their honeymoon, right? Where are you going on your honeymoon? Lots of people going to Cancun, lots of people going to Costa Rica, not many people going to El Salvador or Nicaragua, right? But as these countries move up this development and popularity curve, the prices of real estate move up, occupancies move up. And so what we did in this article, in this graph, and a lot of relational information about it, is we look to people who are watching this podcast as investors, and we say, okay, investors, you need to be thinking about many different facets of an investment overseas. It's not one thing. It's not Central America. In fact, Belize is not one thing. Belize is many different things. And Ambergris Caye, the little island of Ambergris Caye, generates 70% of all the tourism revenue for the country of Belize.
Wow.
Right. And so if you said, well, I want to buy a condo in Belize because I heard Belize is on fire. Well, okay, where in Belize? Ambergris Caye. Well, now where on Ambergris Caye? And what marketplace are you really trying to get into? So understanding that thin slicing of the marketplace is really important. But also understanding your goals and objectives, right? If you decide that you want to own, I'm going to pick both extremes. You want to own a property in, say, Nicaragua, and you say, look, I want an oceanfront condo on the Pacific Ocean for $139,000. Like that would be 10, 15, 20 times that amount in California. So I can see that over time, right, the price appreciation as Nicaragua becomes more popular will go up and my condo will be worth more money. I have to wait time for that to happen, right? But I also understand that my occupancy is going to be lower than it would be in a place like, say, Cancun, the other end of the spectrum, or Cabo San Lucas or something like that, right? Where you're going to pay, I don't know, you're going to pay like $559 or $539 for a beautiful condo on the Caribbean there in Cancun, right? But your occupancies might be 80% annually, right? So, and the ADR, average daily rate, would be higher, right? But what's interesting, if you really look at it, because it's always about yield, right? I mean, we know that from any kind of commercial real estate, it's always about the yield factor. The yield in both examples is about the same, right? I mean, if you can get 5, 6, 7% triple net, cash on cash, right? And again, take the financing out of the picture because we assume there's no financing in most of these equations, right? It's 100% cash. You're going to pay whatever the number is and you're going to own it, right? Outright. If you can get 5, 6, 7 on your condo in Cancun, yeah, it's more money, but you've spent more money to get it. If you can get 5, 6, 7% on your condo in Nicaragua, well, you've spent a lot less money to get it. the thing that we see a lot of investors do who have, the ability to really portfolio size is to pick up maybe one or two in Nicaragua, a couple of them in Belize, one in Cancun or Cabo or something, so that they put themselves all the way across this curve to really take advantage of the appreciating asset that they would get in a country like, say, Nicaragua, El Salvador, that's not very popular, but also have something in Cancun that's just going to constantly generate cash flow, pretty much come anything but COVID, right? I mean, COVID shut everything down, but like, Cancun does not have an off season, really. I mean, they run 12 months out of the year and just crank it. So again, if you've got $1 million portfolio and you can buy 4 or 5 properties across this popularity or development curve, you can really get the best of all worlds. And we see a lot of folks doing that.
And what would you say if using the countries that we're speaking to here, what's on the lowest side of that curve at present time, and which country would you say is actually on the highest end of that curve?
Yeah. And again, I'm going to be a little more specific than country, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
But Nicaragua is certainly not very popular. Okay, it's not a popular country. But we've been working. I lived there for 14 years and have been working there for 21 years now. I love the country. I think it's misaligned. I mean, it's anybody who's my age and older kind of remembers the whole Iran-Contra, Ollie North, Daniel Ortega, Sandinistas, all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, great. I mean, that was like 35 years ago. And so, but we've got that baggage with us, right? The younger generation, not so much. Canadians, definitely not so much. And what we've seen, which is very interesting, is we see a lot of people who don't carry that baggage doing very well in a country like Nicaragua because they just come and look at the facts. They come down, they put their boots on the ground, they walk around and go, oh, well, this is actually pretty nice, and it's actually very inexpensive. And oh wow, if I look at the crime statistics, they're lower than most U.S. cities. I mean, like nobody would think like, I'm afraid to go to Tampa. But I'm guessing, I don't know this for a fact, I'm guessing the crime rate in Tampa is higher than the crime rate in Nicaragua, right? But nobody thinks, I'm not going to Tampa, it's scary, right?
Right.
So anyway, so people who are willing to look at the facts and again, don't have that baggage, look at a country like Nicaragua, maybe a country like El Salvador. Again, not very popular. We hear about the refugees and the gangs and MS-13 is the big one. Everyone's like, MS-13. I'm like, well, are you afraid to go to Los Angeles? Because like, that's really where they are, So again, the people who can kind of put some of those perception-y things behind them actually have the opportunity to get in an incredibly, entry level kind of price point. And there is business. I mean, both Nicaragua and El Salvador are phenomenal surf destinations. Surfers love it. Surfers don't care. And when I talk about surfers, I'm not talking about the backpackers. I'm talking about the doctors, lawyers, accountants who are, 50, 60 years old who try to surf in California in freezing cold water and have to wait like 3 hours to catch a wave because they're crowded, right? You go to a country like Nicaragua, you come to Grand Pacific, for example, we've got 2 world-class surf breaks right there on the property. One of them is actually one of the best in Central America, and they're empty, right? So we have surf people coming down all the time to stay there. Kelly Slater come down to the video shoot. Again, this is people who have kind of dug a little deeper. So that's one end, right, of the spectrum. The other end would be a place like Cancun, Mexico, or Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, right? Where or the Cayman Islands, right? The Cayman Islands would be another example in the Caribbean where they've really kind of hit this pinnacle of tourism. They've got 4 Seasons, JW Marriott's, the high-end hotels, the boutique hotels. They really have everything developed and figured out from a hospitality standpoint. And they're rocking it. I mean, they are absolutely rocking it. And so what that means is, and they're rocking it from a marketing standpoint too, right? I mean, so they just constantly have people in traffic and business. And again, short of COVID, they really don't have, ups and downs very much in their seasonality. Whereas countries like Nicaragua and El Salvador have quite a bit of seasonality. And then I would say that a country like Belize, specifically Ambergris Caye, is really kind of in the sweet spot of this curve because we're just now seeing the brands come there. So we own the Best Western franchise on Ambergris Caye. We built the first 54 studio units. They're up, they're owned, they're renting. We have the franchise for a Marriott resort, which is under development right now. There's one Marriott Autograph open. There's a Curio by Hilton that's open.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we're right at this, I would call it this cuspy point in the country of Belize that's transitioning from this niche kind of, marketplace to more of a mainstream marketplace. And the capacity of room, right? The room capacity is actually struggling to keep up, especially when it comes to something that a mainstream tourist wants, which is a branded product, right? And so Belize is kind of interesting because it is cuspy on this curve. But Cancun, Cabo, kind of at the top end. El Salvador, Nicaragua, not very popular at the bottom end of it. Somewhere like Belize, maybe in the sweet spot.
Looking back at historical trends, using Cabo and Cancun as the case study here, looking back in time, how many, was it a period of over 30 years where they really saw that uptick to where they made it to the pinnacle where they're at today? Or, was it 20 years? Was it 50 years?
Yeah,
I don't know too much about the history of either one of those cities, but ultimately you're right. They're kind of, they're just hitting it on all cylinders right now. But I'm sure looking back 40 years, that maybe wasn't the case. Maybe it was. I don't know. But I'm assuming that you guys have done some studies here to determine exactly how long that upward trend really took both those cities to get where they're at today.
Right. And Cancun was actually a program by the government of Mexico. They set up a corporation or an NGO, whatever, called Fonatur. And they were the ones that said, you know what, we're going to come in here, we're going to build this giant airport. We're going to put in lots of roads. We're going to build, water systems and sewer systems. And we said, we want Cancun to be the Mexican tourist destination for North Americans. And then they recruited hotels and gave them all kinds of tax incentives and just on and on and on. So Cancun was a creation of the Mexican government for tourism. And so it actually hit pretty fast when they got that airport built and they got the first stuff going. I would say Cancun went from literally nothing, truly nothing, to pretty much a major resort in, say, 20, 25 years. Mm-hmm. Whereas Cabo, on the other hand, was more organic. It's been a destination for Californians for many years, decades, right? Decades. And so it grew organically over maybe a 40, 50-year period. What's interesting is they evolved very differently. Cancun is for overnight tourists, spring breakers, partiers, and Cabo has become more of a high-end, classy destination. They still pick up their spring breakers and stuff like that, but residential, right? People have homes in Cabo. Very few people have a home in Cancun, right? They go there on vacation. So the two have evolved very differently. One again for tourism, one organically. And it was a very interesting evolution. So Cancun, probably 20 years, Cabo, maybe 30, 40, 50 years to watch that evolution occur.
Got it. No, I appreciate that context there. Speaking to asset protection, talk to me from an American citizen. Speak to me to the asset protection side of things of owning real estate in these various countries or markets. Is it protected? Are there, in addition to that, are there tax benefits associated with it? Just give us some initial context there, if you would.
Sure. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an accountant. Please consult your lawyer or tax advisor. There are no, basically, if you're a U.S. citizen, there are no tax advantages to anything anymore. Okay. As a U.S. citizen, we are taxed on our worldwide income, period, end of story. Mm-hmm. So there really are no tax benefits. Now, the one thing that people don't really realize is that, and we do this, our company helps a lot of people own property overseas as investments, has to be an investment inside their IRA, which does have the normal U.S. tax, benefits, right? So your IRA is your IRA, you do it because it has tax benefits. Most people don't understand that IRA, when it's in a self-directed form, can actually be used to own property overseas or investments overseas. Wouldn't have to be property, but property overseas. And you can't use it. You can't. It is 100% an investment. Like you got to follow all the IRA rules, right? Mm-hmm. But a lot of people do that because that's where they have some money. And if you've got, a couple $1,000,000 sitting in your IRA and it's in, the stock market and bonds and whatever, maybe you got a couple rental properties in the US too, the idea of diversification of some of your assets, 5%, 10%, pick a number. I mean, it doesn't have to be a lot, but I'm a big advocate of, you talked about asset protection. To me, the biggest form of asset protection is diversification, right? And not just in terms of, asset classes. Yes, some stocks, some bonds, right? So I'm a hard asset guy. I like metals. I think metals are important. I actually think some amount of, exposure to crypto, whatever that is probably smart too. Again, pick your cryptos wisely. There are a lot of, crap coins out there, but, Bitcoin is a favorite of mine just because it's been around and it's limited. And, anyway, but the point is some diversification of those assets. But look, I think most people said, I want 2/3, 3/4 of my money in the stock market. Okay, great. But what are you doing with the other third? How are you going to spread that around? And one of the things that I believe in terms of diversification for asset protection is truly international diversification. Have some of your assets outside your home country. If you're US, get them outside the US. I have a condo in Canada, right? I'm a big fan of Canada too, right? If I was a Canadian, I'd have property in the US. I'm not against the US, right? But I do think that many baskets for some of those eggs, and again, some smaller piece of it, internationally diversified. In terms of property ownership, I'm glad you brought this up because one of the things, this consumer resource guide that we produce, we have 15 questions that people should ask when they buy property overseas. And the reason we put this whole consumer resource guide together in the first place was, we don't know what we don't know. Just like the developer Jim who bought those, bought the land and built 44 condos and then scratched his head his own. No, I'm financing all these sales. I didn't realize there was no bank down here that would do it, right? We as consumers also, we don't know what we don't know. And so we need to, so we've put together this consumer resource guide that outlines it, and several of the questions, 3-4 of the questions are very specific to ownership. Because again, we come with these assumptions, right? We kind of have to forget what we think we know too. Oh yeah, there's a truth in advertising, or there's a consumer group that's protecting me, or they can't do that. And my point is, well, why not? I mean, we're in a new country, we're foreign, right? It's buyer beware. And so a big part of the due diligence needs to be us being smart about how we buy so that we get title to the property. And here's the thing, Kevin, when you get title to your property, your title in these countries is solid. It is rock solid, right? Now, in civil law countries, it's called escritura publica, public title. Mm-hmm. And in common law countries, it's fee simple title, right? Or when it's condos, it's strata title in civil law and strata title in common law, horizontal property regime in civil law, right? So they have different names for it. But at the end of the day, when you get title to your property, you have title to your property. Mm-hmm. And that's an important thing. But the process to actually get your title is the place where a lot of people get tripped up because they don't understand what they should be asking and how they should be proceeding and what that process really is. But when you get it right, yes, you can own it. Mexico is one place where you don't actually get ownership. You get what's called a bank trust, a fideicomiso. But again, it's a 99-year lease. It's passable to your children. I mean, so it's like ownership. And there are a couple other places that are like that in the region. But for the most part, fee simple title or escritura publica is what you want, is what you get. And when you have it, you can sleep good at night that you own the property.
Right,
yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Talk to me about an exciting project you have working right now. What do you have going on, Michael?
It
sounds like you have a number of projects going on. So
we do. I've got to say that our Grand Pacifica project is phenomenal. I love it. We launched a set of tiny homes almost exactly 1 year ago. Last September, the first 100 tiny homes sold. Plus a bunch of other, medium-sized homes and some beachfront properties. And they're all under construction right now, which is very, very exciting to see what's happening there, just come to life, right? That's a big one. Our Best Western community in Belize is also exciting. Studio condos from $125,000, about 3 blocks off the water. Our Marriott property there under development we'll be opening that at the end of 2022. We just started ordering the steel to get it built, and so oceanfront Marriott homes, residences from $325,000. But actually, the thing I'm most excited about, and it's probably not right for anyone on this call, but I throw it out there because I am excited about it, and for anybody who's willing to do their own research, for anyone who's willing to kind of forget about all the stuff they ever heard from their friends, their neighbors who don't even have a passport, right? That's the thing. I actually have an article. I have an article that I wrote, be careful who you take advice from, right? All these people don't even have a passport, give me offshore advice. They're
that's funny.
Yeah, right. Anyway, El Salvador, Kevin, I just got back from El Salvador. They are making Bitcoin legal tender next. Well, I don't know when this will air, but September 7th.
I've heard about that. Yeah, I've heard.
Yeah. September 7th, Bitcoin is legal tender. So we partnered with the gentleman who's called the godfather of Bitcoin in El Salvador. He's the one that got it transactional in the country via social programs. He's been down there doing great work in the community for about 15 years. Had a big donor come along and said, "Hey, I'll give you a whole bunch of Bitcoin, but you gotta use it. You can't cash it out for money. You've got to turn it into like a currency." And he did in this little town called El Zonte, which is a surf town right there near the capital. And it went gangbusters. And the country of El Salvador looked at what was happening in El Zonte and said, "We want to do this for the country." And Mike Peterson is his name. Mike is the guy that got it all started. He owns a beautiful piece of property overlooking the town and the beach. And he approached us a few months ago when I was speaking at the Bitcoin conference in Miami and asked us to develop this property for him, with him, to make it a community for Bitcoiners or folks that are into it. And we are, and it's very exciting. It's going to launch just in a couple of days. So what am I most excited about? That's what I'm most excited about. But
that's exciting. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. But let me circle back to our real business mantra, which is this. Because we develop in Belize, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, Panama, El Salvador, Mexico, we've got projects in the mountains, which is springtime all the time. We've explored for property, and we almost had a deal in Argentina for a vineyard community. We have 2 properties on the Pacific. We have 2 properties on the Caribbean. We've got agricultural properties coming online in Mexico, first quarter of next year, right? So we've got all these different kinds of products. And what really truly makes me the most excited is we can go to the marketplace and we can ask people what they want to own, right? If they're surfers, we can help them own something on the Pacific with the big waves. If they dive or snorkel or fish, on the Caribbean, or if they want a place where the temperature is 65 at night and 75 in the day, every day of the year, like springtime, every day of the year, right? We can help them own that in the highlands of Panama. And so for me, the most exciting thing is being able to serve people with a home overseas that really fits what they want in terms of the climate, the amenities, the neighborhood, the community, and while that's not as exciting in the exact moment as El Salvador is today, ultimately it's the most exciting thing we do as a company, and that's serve people with product that's a good fit for them.
I absolutely love that. And Michael, I mean, you mentioned the consumer resource guide that you have. You mentioned on multiple occasions, and I spent some time on your website. I'm not sure if that's where that's housed or not, but for those that want to learn more about you and your company and everything that you guys have going on, and also gain access to that consumer resource guide, where's the best place to learn more about what everything that you guys have going on?
Yeah, the best thing, obviously, you hit our website, but we always like to know that they came from folks like you. So if you just Kevin Bupp at ECIDevelopment.com, that'll and just put in the subject line, consumer guide, or if you heard about a country, Belize or something, I mean, just put that in the subject line. We'll get back to you and let you select out some country handbooks, the consumer resource guide, other resource material that we make available to folks. All complimentary. We want you We want you to spend some time, take a look at it, understand it, and then come visit, right? Get on a plane and come see us.
Yeah, I was gonna say, aside from that, I mean, for those for those that have an interest, maybe they've done a little bit of research already that know they want to, ultimately make an investment and out of the U.S. and maybe one of these locations that we've been speaking to today. I mean,
Right.
what is the typical process of someone coming and taking a tour? I mean, do you have organized tours for prospects, or is it kind of just like come in your leisure and take a look at what we have going on, or how does that normally work?
Yeah, I mean, yes to both.
Okay.
One of the things that a lot of the folks that we work with, like you, Kevin, do is like you'll put a little trip together. You say, you know what? I think February would be a great time to go to Belize.
Mhm.
Just making it up, whatever, right? And so you might get a group of 8, 10, 15 folks and bring them to Belize or Panama or wherever. And that's a lot of fun because what that lets you do is connect up with your folks and have a fun trip, and that's a bonding experience for you. And there is zero high pressure anything from us. We are all about service. Come down and so we have these things called discovery tours. You come down, you meet the bankers, you meet the lawyers, you meet an insurance agent or two, you meet some trust agents if you want to have a structure to, they do companies and things like that too. So we'll set you up with a bunch of people that you can look to for the various services that you might want if you decide to move ahead. Then we do fun things. We have scavenger hunts, sunset cruises. Obviously, we'll tour the property, but that's it. I mean, and if
Okay.
if folks enjoy it and want to be a part of it, we certainly love to have them. If one of the dates that we run the discovery tours doesn't fit, yeah, we've got property consultants all over all the time, so you can arrange a trip that fits your schedule the best as well.
Awesome. Well, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today.
Yeah.
Exciting to hear about all your various endeavors that you have going on, and I guess welcome back to the States after many
Yes.
years away.
Well, yeah, and thanks
Yeah,
for having me. And
yeah,
I hope to see you and a bunch of your folks down in a couple of these countries sometime. It'd be a lot of fun.
that sounds like a plan. I think we're going to make that happen. So again,
All right.
thank you, Michael, for joining us, and guys, thank you for tuning in to this week's show. And so until we meet again next week, this is your host Kevin Butt, wishing you huge success. You guys take care.